The following is a presentation of Tuning into Sci-Fi TV, the viewer's guide to genre television.
Hey everyone, welcome to a special bonus podcast for Game of Thrones Season 5. I am Wendy Hembrock, and I am joined again by our wonderful small council. We have a full quorum tonight, so let's go around the room and introduce yourselves, please.
Hey everybody, it's Lou from up in Canada, and today I am the master of the barbecue.
Ooh.
Tasty. This is Christine from Michigan, the mistress of correction and consistency.
Hey, this is Shannon from Vancouver, Washington, and I am the master of unfortunately timed praise of the Boltons.
I actually thought this is Jesse from Dallas, and we'll have to talk about that later because I thought of you while watching the episode, Shannon. And I am the master of I need Lexapro to watch this show.
What now?
What is that?
Lexapro is an antidepressant.
Oh, okay.
I think we all need a few drops of that in our
Well, if you need an
drinks.
antidepressant, Jesse, the universe must be dying.
No, his unicorn's just under the weather. So.
Oh, okay.
And I am Wendy. I am the mistress of not that many links this week and your moderator. So we're going to be talking about episode 6. Can you believe it? We're more than halfway through. Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken. But before we start talking about that, we got some feedback from Davia that I want to talk about. Davia had 3 questions. I'm going to pose all of them and let everyone respond. The first was whether anybody thought that Sansa might be planning to try to kill Ramsay when they got back to their wedding bedroom, and was sort of stalled in her plan when Theon didn't leave the room. That's the first question. Second, was anyone else besides Davia disappointed that there wasn't a death in the episode? And number 3, were folks disappointed in either Marjorie or the Sand Snakes, especially the folks who've read the books to how things played out in the episode?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's what that means. Okay. Bookies. I was trying to figure where are
Oh,
bookies?
you thought we were betting.
I don't remember any bookies in the episode.
Sorry, folks. Lou is referencing a shared document that we're looking at, in which I say, especially bookies.
But I bet there would be lots of gambling in Dorne.
Yeah, you would think so.
I would bet there's gambling everywhere.
Okay, I will go through these questions. I do not. I've seen these tweets as well on the internet, and I did not think Sansa was planning on killing Ramsay. I know she was making some moves by her wrist to undo the sleeve of her gown, but I think that's all she was doing. I think she was more freaked out that Ramsay made Theon stay in the room more than anything else. And I guess her second question must tie into the first point, that maybe she was hoping that Sansa was going to kill Ramsay because...
I think this is the overall episode. There were so many opportunities where there should have been somebody dying.
No, we can have a breather on that front. And as far as the third question goes, yeah, the whole Dorne sequence was not good, in my opinion.
I agree, Lou. I don't think Sansa was going for a weapon when she was going at her sleeve. I mean, if she was planning on killing Ramsay, she wasn't making a move for it until after she found out Theon would be in the room. I think she was just fumbling with her clothes. No, I was not disappointed there wasn't a death. We get enough of those in this show. We could take an episode off. Although I think that it's possible we saw the beginning of a death coming up. That they really zoomed in on Bronn getting his wrist cut. It wasn't a very severe cut, but we do know that Oberyn was very fond of using poisons on his weapon, and those are his daughters. However, I was rather disappointed in the Sand Snakes. I mean, maybe some of us watched too many of the behind-the-scenes stuff leading up to this season, but they were really built up as like this badass group, and that was kind of disappointing. Basically, it was the three of them against 1.5 men. And I strongly emphasize the half because Jaime is nowhere near up to snuff. He was barely doing anything to fend off the one with the spear. I wasn't disappointed in Marjorie in this episode. I expressed my disappointment heavily with her in, I believe it was 2 episodes ago. What she did in this episode was pretty much all she could do given the circumstances.
Yeah, for me, I didn't get the impression that Sansa was reaching for a knife or a weapon. I can see how that may have been some people's impression just by the way it was kind of shot and edited. But I didn't think that. As far as the disappointed that there wasn't a death, terrible things happen to people in Westeros, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a death. And we did have something terrible happen to a character last night, so we got our share of misery. And not Marjorie that I was disappointed in, but there was something frustrating about the defense of the Tyrells, which we'll get to when we talk about our disappointments later. And then as for the Sand Snakes, I'm having a hard time putting my finger on why that's falling flat, because from what we've seen, they cast well. I mean, Keisha Castle Hughes is a tremendous actress. I don't know the other two that well. Alaria Sand is cast very well. They're shooting on location in a gorgeous, beautiful, real-life place, and they've enhanced it visually. The costuming is fantastic. The weaponry is fantastic, but it's not hanging together, and it seems kind of short-shrifted and facile. Maybe it's because we spent 4.5 seasons getting to know the other regions so well, and like if you say the Wall or King's Landing or the Eyrie, you instantly conjure up all these characters and all this backstory and all these events that have taken place. And up until Oberyn, we've only mainly heard about Dorne rather than seen it, and they're trying to do too much Cliff's Notes for it. I don't know, but it's not working really well for me.
I did not think Sansa was going to kill Ramsay, but I thought Theon was. I kept waiting, saying this brutal scene was going to shake him out of his mind control and brainwashing, and I was ready to, because we all hated Theon, and then we were like, okay, I'm glad all this crap happened to him, and then you're like, oh, I almost feel sorry for him. So I was hoping he would go all, code green on him and take care of him. So yes, I was disappointed it wasn't death because I was wanting it to be Ramsay. And I'm not disappointed in Marjorie, but I'll save my disappointment when we get to that part of the show. That's called a tease, listeners.
I did not think that Sansa had a knife, but I love the idea that she might be sewing knives into her dresses. I hope she does run with that idea. It's a good one. I was also hoping that this brutality would be the thing that would wake Theon up. Maybe it will. I was not disappointed that there wasn't a death, and I have to admit, the place I was expecting one was in that fight in Dorne. And I do agree with Christine. Somebody might be dying who isn't quite dead yet.
Did you have a specific, I think this person is going to die in mind?
Well, I was thinking it was going to be Jaime or Bronn. I was thinking one of those two is not going to make it out of this fight. Then the fight was so disappointing. I was like, they better win this fight. So, and I'm going to be bummed if it's Bronn, I have to say, because I like him. Who knew he was such a great singer, huh? And
He was in a boy band.
Oh. He was singing in season 2 before the Battle of the Blackwater.
So, and I was not disappointed with Marjorie. Although I do agree overall that this episode was mostly an episode of woe. And I would take whatever that drug is that I already forgot the name of that Jesse was offering.
Oh, woe is in sadness. No, not woe as in Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, not woe as in Keanu Reeves. So thanks for the feedback, Davia. Send in more. And also to encourage other folks to send in some feedback, I want to announce that the Small Council has a contest.
We do?
We
That is
do.
awesome.
So last week we had talked about this awesome Westeros Histories book, and we thought that would be a great gift for some of our listeners if they want to, go a little deeper into Westeros. And also, you can win any single season of Game of Thrones on DVD or Blu-ray. The only rules are that Valo Dorharis, all men must serve. So to serve the Small Council, you need to send us your voice on a message about a minute, no longer than 2 minutes long. And we just want you to speak into the microphone. And you can tell us about pretty much anything, as long as it's, civil. But you can submit questions. You can submit a theory, a comment for the council to then further discuss. You can talk about who you hope will sit on the Iron Throne, who you bet will sit on the Iron Throne. Tell us what your sigil would be. Tell us where you would live in Westeros, what house or order or group you might join if you lived in the Westeros universe. If by some chance you got onto the Small Council, what would your title be? You can send us the title of your epic ballad or your epic poem. You basically just have to talk to us, and that will get you entered into this contest. And we're going to run it for a while. We're going to announce the winner when we wrap up episode 9. So you've got a couple of weeks, and check the show notes for the more details.
As a representative
to sum
of
up, call us or send us your voice and stay on topic.
That's right. As a representative of the international masters, is this open to everyone or just to the U.S.?
Oh, yes. This is open to the United States and everywhere else beyond the walls around the United States.
I think that includes Canada.
We have
All
walls.
right.
Now, I do have to warn people, if you're far away, it might take a while for your shipment to come, but it will get there eventually.
Ravens get tired.
Okay, now, more
Yes.
importantly, the most important thing, can I enter this contest?
No, the members of
Darn.
the Small Council are not eligible.
Oh, I was going to ask for season 6 too. Darn it.
That
this
would
was
take even
Joffrey's
longer to
regime,
get there.
If this was Joffrey's regime, we could.
Now, you could appeal, you could make side appeals and petition the court, but not on the air.
Don't worry, I'll be getting in touch with my roommate, my friends, all that stuff.
There you go. Yes, proxies are fine. And you, this is a contest that you can actually enter more than once, as long as whatever you leave on your voicemail is not the same. So
We're playing these on the show, right?
Oh, absolutely. We will use people's feedback on the show and discuss it and all that stuff too. And depending on how much we get, we might put it into a bonus show. We might sprinkle it here and there. We'll have to see once we see all the awesome stuff we get.
The show could get long, folks.
it'd be a lot of fun though to play them and kind of talk about it and enjoy kind of interacting with our listeners. That would be great.
Exactly. It might go on, well past the end of the season, which would be kind of cool. Keep the conversation going.
To help us get through the long winter.
Yes.
Because winter is coming.
Yes.
Well put, Jesse.
I also want to point out some links in the show notes to the HBO goodies inside the episode. Also, some bonus features. I think these were actually from the season 1 bonus features, but they're the history and lore of the Targaryens and Mad King Aerys, which, given what we've seen with Valyria and the dragons lately, was particularly relevant, I thought, to revisit. We also have the showrunners and producers talking about yet another wedding in Westeros, this time the Bolton Stark wedding. Sophie Turner, who plays Sansa, has an interview, as well as Ewan Ryan, who plays Ramsay. There's also been a great deal of discussion about the wedding night on the internet. We have a link to one particular interview. We also have some comments by George Martin about generally the deviations between the books and the show, of which Sansa's wedding night is one of them. And we also have a link to Lexicon Valley podcast talking with the person who invented the Game of Thrones languages. He's also the guy who invented the languages for Defiance, and I think he did BSGs too, if I'm not mistaken.
I love that nowadays they're actually officially making languages for all of these fantasy worlds. It's wonderful and so beautiful too.
Yeah, if you're a word nerd, that's a really good podcast to listen to, because he talks about the process of how he got the job, and then they talked about taking like 50 words from that were in the actual text, and then basing a language around that, and then it's really interesting and in depth if you like that kind of thing.
It's not just Klingon and Elven anymore, folks. Also, I really loved the Sophie Turner interview where she's kind of like a real life Ramsay a little bit, where she was messing with the producer, Brian Cogman, telling him, how could you do this to Sansa? And then loving every minute of like the challenge of acting this role out.
I'm looking forward to talking about everyone's kind of feelings about this wedding night. And it was kind of funny that it hit the internet. It was a tie between that and the Mad Men stuff, right? That was hitting Twitter and other stuff. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
And a lot of stuff from the Outlander episode on Saturday, too. It was just a storm of hot takes and commentary and insight.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think the Outlander one also influenced some people's reactions to this episode, where it was like, how much more sadomasochism can we see?
Wait, I must have missed, I know Outlander and, of course, this show, but I don't know anything about Mad Men. What happened there?
No,
it was the series finale.
It wasn't a bad thing. It just
okay. I thought there was some crazy theme happening this weekend.
They had a crazy ending.
Yeah.
Don Draper tortured this guy from Coca-Cola.
Yeah, it was just amazing.
Put it up his nose.
He went crazy at a peacenik retreat.
He went all Forrest Gump.
Okay, so let's get into starting to talk about the episode. First of all, credits-wise, I didn't notice anything in the credits. Did anyone else?
Nope, nothing.
Nope.
No, I didn't.
Okay, then let's talk about I'll call it the short first impression and maybe rating or grading for the episode. So let's start with you, Lou.
This is tough because there's some really good parts to it, but the whole Dorne sequence to me is got to take at least a grade or maybe 2 off of it. So on, and I think I used this before, but I have to go back to it. I'm going to have to say 8. Why did it have to be snakes?
Well done.
Okay, so just quick bullet points. Tyrion's sweet talking is a delight as always. I am glad to see Arya progressing through her storyline and to get a little more information and insight into the House of White and Black. Bronn's singing is just wonderful. I love it. And they can have him singing for the rest of the episodes he's in, and I would be perfectly happy. Loris's inquest, I noticed Lady Olenna gave Cersei a look that said, "Two can play at this game," and I can't wait to see what that's going to lead to. And while there was a lot of uncomfortableness in this episode, I would still give it an 8 out of 10.
For me, I've been consistently in the A range, like a A or a A minus for all of the episode, all 5 of the episodes thus far. And this one is the first one that wasn't quite up to that standard for me. There were still some great things. I mean, just Bronn's reaction to the sand snakes was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I mean, it's just perfect Bronn and the Tyrion stuff and any scene with Lena Headey and Diana Rigg is a delight. So there was a lot to like. The Sansa thing at the end, I'm sure we'll go in depth on that later. So for me, it was kind of in the B to B plus range. And when I say the worst of the season, I mean, it was still a really good episode, but not up to the snuff of the others.
An unsettling episode, more bad crap happening to almost everyone. And I find myself asking, why the hell do I watch this show? And the answer is because I get to talk to the Small Council about it.
So without us, Game of Thrones would lose you?
The doctor is in.
Peer pressure works.
Peer pressure works. No, I'd probably stick with it, but you have that going with it. Last week I got to go first. And so this time I'm just know all the good parts I want to talk about are going to be taken. But yes, there were a lot, the singing, Tyrion using his tongue in his second favorite pastime, using it to save his life. But I agree with Shannon a little bit. It's just not quite as good as some of the others. So I gave this episode 7 out of 10. Check off birthmarks. I did like that.
Ooh, nice.
You know what? As often as we complained about that, I was like, well done, Game of Thrones. I
still say it could have been shorter.
I'm just saying, though, there was a payoff. So I'm calling it Chekhov's birthmark.
Chekhov has had a lot to do. He's had birthmarks and grayscale, and
Chekhov
absolutely
left a lot of artifacts around.
Chekhov's unimportant love story.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe that's what will save Jorah or something. So I agree. I think this was the weakest episode of the season so far, which is not to say it was bad, but I could probably only go a B plus as a grade. And this probably sounds rude, I'm going to say 7 dwarf cocks.
I almost said 7 cock merchants. Which, do you not think that is one of the worst jobs ever? What do you do?
It's an out-of-the-box job. I was like, wow, I never thought I'd hear that as somebody's job.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have a few of those in China.
But hopefully not of humans, but...
And I just for a moment, I love thinking, oh, they wouldn't tell that it was the dwarves.
That was hilarious.
I
was expecting someone to demand proof there.
I thought they were going to pull his pants down.
He's like, no, it wouldn't. I don't care if I almost am going to die. I'm throwing it out there, almost literally.
Okay, so now let's go around the map in details. Highlights.
For me, it would be the Cersei Olenna scene where the two were verbally fencing with one another, and I always liked layered dialogue like that. So, and they're two good actresses, or I should say actors, and I thought they really got a lot of good shots into each other. Though I was surprised that Olenna bought the premise that once they got through this meeting, that everything would be okay. Like that. seemed like a blind spot that I don't think that she would possess. But she doesn't trust Cersei for good reason. So I was surprised that she acquiesced to that meeting in the first place. But that was probably my favorite scene of the whole episode.
That was definitely an interesting scene. She was very much trying to be her father there, and Lady Olenna called her out on it. Don't even try to pretend that you're writing anything important. Right. She's probably doodling. But I don't know. I don't think there was really anything she could have done to stop that initial meeting from happening. But I think after the hearing they had, she's definitely going to turn that one around. I mean, the look she gave her at the end of that trial just said, "Oh, you want to play this way? Well, two can play this game. Just wait." And I think this is the start of everything falling apart in King's Landing.
Yeah, that I referenced that scene earlier too. They're great together, and you can tell the one-upsmanship going on. And I also loved her entrance in the carriage when she's like, "Oh, you can smell the shit from 5 miles away." Dinah Rigg is just a treasure.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed, not in the scene, but that she didn't, she says these aren't idle threats, but they kind of were. Now, I think the hammer is going to come down later, but that's my only disappointment, because the scene, you're right, was great. But all this whole storyline, I keep wanting someone to step up and say, look, this crap is over. We're giving these people too much power. And I thought that we were going to get that last night in a couple places.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Grammy Rosebush didn't just shut her down a little more effectively, because she definitely has the upper hand, or she should have the upper hand. And maybe it's just because Cersei is too petulant to realize what she's doing, that she keeps, pressing forward with her. So I was also frustrated because we didn't get sort of a clear win by the Tyrells before this whole inquest thing started. And then once that happened, you could see the look on Diana Rigg's face when she was like, "Oh, this has gone way too far." And I thought it was a great scene. First, when it was the two of them together, but then later in the trial or Inquisition or whatever, to see how the sand is shifting under everybody's feet in that scenario. I don't even know, that Cersei was as in control of things as she thought she was by the end. Especially
if they can arrest the queen, why can't they arrest the queen mother? Like, I don't see how she can't see that at this point. So
she's so very stubborn. I mean,
they all have this blind spot, eh?
She thinks because she set all of this in motion, there's no way it can be used against her. Yeah. And she's completely trying to hide behind this wall of, well, I didn't arrest him. I'm not the one trying him. Yeah. She just keeps putting that out there like it's a solid defense. And I'm like, you're hiding behind a sheet of glass. This isn't going to work.
Yeah, and speaking of the defense, the nitpick I had in that scene was the supposing damning evidence was the identification of the birthmark.
You'd expect them to demand to see it right then and there. Pull down your pants.
Well, but not even that. The guy that was doing it was a squire for Loras.
Yeah.
Right. So he would change his clothes. He would see him undressed.
And all that, and see him before and after jousts or whatever. So, I mean, that's a thing easily enough explained, and I don't know why. Either they have no defense for it or they didn't attempt to.
I think the issue was that Loras is a little bit hot-headed. He's emotional.
Yes.
And the fact Marjorie's reaction also wasn't appalled or shouting that this man's a liar. She just looked incensed, just upset by what he was saying.
Incensed.
That's the word I was looking for. Incensed.
Incensed.
Not incest.
I don't know why that word's popping into my head.
This show's really warping our minds.
Yes, it is.
I don't know why that would be so prevalent in my mind.
Yeah, the other thing that was frustrating about that scene, just to go back to the Inquisition for a second, was Tommen, because he made absolutely no effort to back Marjorie at all.
I
And
just keep giving that
he
giving that
went
kid a pass, seriously.
completely back into being a 12-year-old.
You know,
He
Wendy,
hasn't
that
stopped
is
being a 12-year-old.
yeah. I mean, Wendy, that is under my list of disappointments that we'll talk about in a minute. And so I'm going to kind of jump out of order to say that's totally it. You know, dude, it's time to step up. You're the king, and you're letting these two strong women kind of run over you, and you don't want to make either one mad. And I think this is where it really hurts that he doesn't have an advisor to tell him, like his grandfather would have said, you know, you need to be a wise king, you need to listen, you know, this needs to stop now.
Right.
But there's no one there to tell him that, and he looks like a confused little boy.
I am just going to keep giving Tommen a pass because truth is, he is 12. I think back when I was 12, there's no way I could have handled a situation like that. I probably would have run out of the room crying. I give him props for sitting there and just trying to take it all in. And the people advising him are at odds with each other. He's got Marjorie on one side telling him one thing and his mother on the other side telling him something else. He doesn't know what to do. And I can't blame him at all for what position he's been put in.
Oh, I can totally blame him. He knows he's the king. He knows he's the highest authority. So at a minimum, he can say, wait a minute, I'm the king. You all need to shut the hell up.
But he's never He's never exhibited that behavior, though.
I understand that he hasn't, but it's not that he doesn't understand that he has that authority. He does understand he has that authority. He just didn't use it.
When he tried to use that authority with the High Sparrow, he couldn't even get past his guards because he realized the only way to really assert his authority in that situation was violence, and that was the one thing he knew he didn't want to do. He doesn't know how to use the authority he has.
It's not within him.
Yeah, you would think he would say, going, hey, you're taking away my honeymoon, pal. You know, dude.
He did. The problem is he made no effort. He didn't try anything.
That's what, you know,
even if he just flailed around, he made no effort.
What would you have wanted him to do?
I would have wanted him to say, "Hey, I'm the king, so I don't like where this conversation's going. It's over now." I mean, he could do a lot of things to just stop the momentum.
Yeah, and I think once they say they're putting him, I think he should have said, stop. No one is being arrested. We are going to stop. We're going to, take a break. And I will, see my, it's like a judge would. We'll meet in my chamber.
We're having a recess.
Yeah.
Well, technically, Loras was already arrested, so they were just taking him back into custody.
And based on the Sparrow's previous statement, if he would have done that, they all would have been arrested on the spot. So, because the law does not exclude anybody, including the king. So
nothing is above the seven gods.
Well, no, but he is a king's guard. He wouldn't be taken into custody by them.
Right.
Yeah, it would have escalated in some sense.
I think they're kind of outnumbered.
I don't think so.
Well, I mean, no, I'll say.
Okay. It sounds like we're going to agree to disagree.
Yes. It was disappointing, but it was expected. That's all I can say.
Yeah, no, I didn't expect him to succeed, but I did expect him to try something.
Okay.
So, Christine, what do you got for a highlight?
Well, I love Arya. And we got to see a lot more of her this episode.
And she killed somebody. Now that I think of it.
Yeah, hey, there was a death.
There was a death.
There was a death. It was just nobody really important.
Yay, we win. We got to see the Game of Faces and how it's actually supposed to be played. And Arya gave it her best shot. I think the issue she was having is that she was choosing lies that he knew were lies, or even lies that everybody would know was a lie. I mean, he was likely to know the little details from when they were both traveling north with the Night's Watch. So when she said she had stabbed the kid in the back, he probably had overheard her telling someone else that she had stabbed him in the belly, the big fat belly. When she tried to say someone that killed someone was named Polliver, he knew that kid was named Polliver. So they're not believable lies. And of course, everybody knows how Ned died. So she needs to make sure she's choosing lies that the audience listening to her story cannot rip apart. And that's why it worked so well with the little girl, which I was actually surprised they allowed her to handle that situation so early in her time there. She's only been there for a few weeks, but she handled it really well. She told a very compassionate story that really helped the girl be calm and relaxed and, drink the water. Is it water? I still want to know exactly what that is. I mean, I can't imagine it's a giant pool of poison, and I think it would taste like water. Maybe it's laced with iocane or something.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask that. Had we been established that this water would kill someone?
Yes, we saw it the first time when she was
missed that somehow. Okay.
Yeah,
we actually speculated about whether it was the water or something else that did it.
Or that maybe the water is magical and it may kill you or heal you. You never know. But now we know what they do with the dead bodies, or at least their heads. I mean, I know they have to clean the whole body, but we only saw that they saved the heads. I wonder what happens with the rest of the body. And I wonder if the reason they save the heads is so that they can use them for the reference for their transformations.
Along those lines, I would say that sequence was also notable for how well it was composed from the special effects and the set and the direction and the lighting, the house in the black and white, especially when they opened it up and you saw all those pillars with all the faces. That was extraordinarily well done in that scene.
Yeah, I was confused by that scene, and I'm hoping that the Small Council can explain me what they're doing. I guess I had not thought about it, but is that they have to use these faces, you have to have them somewhere for you to magically change into that? I don't know. I had not thought of that, but that makes a little bit of sense. But I still don't know. Wait a minute. Let me see if I can do this right. This podcaster doesn't understand. I can't do it the way he does. I was very confused.
A man does not understand.
A man does not understand.
I think you need to watch Futurama, because in Futurama they've got heads in jars all over the place.
Okay.
And to me it seems like this is your reference collection, and I have to assume they're doing something with the body itself to channel the magic that's letting them appear as the person. That's completely speculation. I'm not drawing from any evidence from the show other than they got a lot of heads in that vault. I loved the drama of him finally taking her down there. And then he's asking her, is a girl ready to give up her nose, her eyes, her physical attributes? And then he says, her name, her possessions. He says, no, you're not ready for that, but you're ready to have a different face. The one thing I wanted to point out, because I actually went back and listened again, was he hit her when she said she hated the Hound, and he hit her twice.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you guys believe that Arya didn't hate him?
I think it's exactly the way he said.
Yeah. She started out hating him.
Yeah, she started out hating him, but she grew to at least appreciate him and respect him.
Yeah.
And she was lying to herself about still hating him.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, it's complicated because if she did have affection for him, she would have just killed him mercifully at the end. Like when they were on the road together and somebody was dying, she did a mercy killing on one of those random people. But she didn't do it for him. She left him to die slowly and painfully. So that was a little in that zone of, does Jaqen think she's lying about it, or she's not lying well enough? I
think if you go back and listen to the way she says it the first time, where she says, I hated him, she said it a little too harshly, a little too strongly, almost as if she was trying to convince herself of that, or that she had worked hard to convince herself of that, and he could hear how she had to work to convince herself that she hated him because it wasn't true.
Yeah, maybe. But then when she told the story to the little, evidently, a couple of whacks with a stick works, because not only Macy Williams, but Macy Williams as Arya did a fine job acting with that little girl at the fountain. I mean, that story that she told sounded completely believable,
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. See, there's a difference in trying to win at a game and trying to be compassionate to someone who's in pain.
Yeah, it didn't surprise me that Arya was capable of that. She's, and it's kind of the flip side, because with the Hound, she treated him brutally because he kept telling her that's the way you're supposed to behave. And it almost in a way that was like her graduation event from his teaching. But it was awful because he had sort of come to appreciate who she was. And, he always ridiculed her as weak because she was kind and she thought of other people. And she was, in a way sort of demonstrating that she'd learned his lesson. And there's probably some, regret at her part for doing that.
Yeah, that sequence was very interesting. It was, like Jesse said, it was kind of frustrating at the same time because we were starting to finally find something out about this order, but I was confused about the journey that Arya was on from the perspective that they were hammering into her at the beginning that she's to lose her identity and become no one. But in this episode, it was almost, to me, it seemed like they wanted her to maybe just get back to being truly honest with herself and reestablishing her identity, because he was asking who she was and she was telling him that she was Arya. And, for the previous episodes, it was always you are no one, you are no one. So I'm not quite sure if that was an intended journey or maybe they just want to break her down and have her rebuild herself back up.
The point of the game of faces is to tell a story that is believable to the person listening, and you get hit when they can tell you're lying. For her to play the game effectively right at the beginning, like her first try, it's more believable if she starts with the truth and tries to change little details.
Sure.
He wasn't trying to insist that she needs to become herself again. It's just trying to get her to start on the path of being able to take on another persona.
Ah, okay. Very good. Thank you. I missed that. But so that clears that up for me. And her moment with the girl was very interesting. And I think that's a moment that any one of these characters that's trying to become part of this group, I think that's like an initiation moment, that until they help someone pass over to the other side, they won't be allowed into that other room with the faces. And I might be wrong in that, but I kind of got the feeling that that's, one of the best, if you read the stories of this stuff about assassins and that, some of the most famous assassins have the ability to almost have their target pretty well take their own life, just by setting up choices for them. And, you can take this path or this path, but if you want to do the right thing and cause the least damage to everybody that you love, then you should take your own life kind of path. And I thought that this sort of played off of that riff a bit. So I really like that moment. And I got to tell you, like when she was in that room and that last head there, I was thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger from Total Recall when he was trying to go through the checkpoint and he had that woman's head on and he threw it away and it was a bomb. And I kept on waiting for her eyes to open. I was just like, come on, she's going to open her eyes. She's going to open her eyes. But she never did. So that was a pretty cool scene. And I'm curious, like everyone else, how I assume that these are the faces that they can copy. It'd be interesting to know what the range on this is, because when the teacher did it, he was pretty far away from this room. So I don't know if there's a range limit on this thing, or maybe they just really.
Now you're talking like a true geek, wondering the range of the spell effect.
Yeah, exactly. Of a sparrow.
But he did it at Heron Hall, so it's got to be a pretty good range, unless unless the face of the dead person he took was somebody not that far away.
At first, when you read it or watch it, you almost think like, okay, it's a Mission Impossible type thing where they actually put on the face.
There's Tom Cruise. No.
Yeah, but it's somehow some kind of magic involved where you have the face and you put it in a memory bank, and then like Lou, I get all geeky about it. It's like, okay, is there a limit? Can you only carry 5 at a time? And what's the range? And how frequently can you change them?
Are we talking about Game of Thrones or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that
Mission Impossible.
Or Monty Python with the sparrows.
But yeah, so you start wondering about those things, and I hope we do get to delve more into that and see some of those answers.
Well, my impression was that this was level 2 for Arya, because that her act of compassion to the kid, she demonstrated that she could do that, and she wasn't killing someone for her own benefit. She was killing that kid for the family's benefit, to ease the pain of the child and the pain of the father. So to me, that was what earned her the trip to the basement, which I think that's what Lou was talking about too.
Yeah,
most definitely.
Yeah, I agree that the compassion she showed and using the lies in a non-selfish way, I think is the reason, from my perspective, Mr. Positivity, right? That, she's using, to mix our metaphors, the force for good. She's using, not the dark side to kind of help someone. And I think that's the step she took. I agree with you guys.
We've already covered a couple of things that I had on my list in terms of the Cersei and Olenna talk and the House of Black and White. So I'll just say, the couple of moments we got comic relief from Bronn and from Tyrion in 2 separate locations. And I also like the way that we once again saw how quick Tyrion is with his wits in a dire situation. They're washed up. They're surrounded by these guys. They're going to throw one in the galley and they're going to kill Tyrion, or they're going to cut his cock off, and he can't tell which one first. But then, he starts talking about, oh, well, there's a cock merchant, and surely they'd want to see that. And then he spins this tale about Ser Jorah. And I liked that whole subterfuge because it was grounded in the truth. He really did beat Dothraki Blood Rider, and he was kind of a knight and had won several battles. But I like to see characters live by their wits in those situations. So that was another good point for me.
Yeah, it's on my list too. I love when he's in a corner, and I love when the show presents how smart he is, and how quick. Wait a minute, the pits are open? Oh, this is your lucky day. I mean, it is almost like a used car salesman, right? Like turning around, just going, oh, wow, you know how much money you can make off this guy? And at first, Jorah's not really jumping on board. And then after a while, he's like, oh, yes, I have. And so that was really cool.
Yeah, the other thing I want to add about Tyrion in this episode was, normally we don't see him, we don't see his stature, but it was really important to emphasize that he's this tiny, vulnerable guy amongst these people who are going to kidnap them and kill them. And it really built the tension, and it did a great job of sort of solidifying the alliance between Tyrion and Jorah. It started last week with the fight in the boat, but this week there was a point where they just finished talking about their fathers, right? He talked about how he had killed Tywin. He mentioned and then felt really bad about how he blurted out Mormont was dead because Jorah didn't know. That there was some really interesting stuff with Tyrion across that whole conversation. So it wasn't just that he was smart, but he was also, kind too to him, to Jorah, once he realized he just told him his father died. And when he stands up and they start walking, I was like, wow, they usually, and I kind of forgot that Peter Dinklage is that tiny, because I was like, wow, I don't normally think of him as tiny. even though I know he's a dwarf, I still think of him as, carrying as much weight psychically or psychologically as any other character. So I thought that was a really good visual to put him in even more danger.
Yep, good point. I also like their discussion that they had about Jorah's father, it's just a reminder of this world that news travels slowly, because Jorah had no idea that his father was not alive anymore. So that was a nice moment as well.
I don't think he really had a way of finding out about his father.
No.
That kind of news just isn't something that travels across the Narrow Sea.
Mm-hmm.
What I did like is that when they were saying that Tyrion was worthless, instead of bringing up the fact that he has a large price on his head, which might have gotten him into more trouble, he says that there's definitely, he encourages that there is value in him aside from that, like doesn't even bring that up at all, and then follows it up with a nice yarn that will get them taken in the direction that they're going. They're about to go back to Volantis, and instead he hears that the fighting pits are open in Marine, and he's like, Marine, that's where we're going. Let's push them that way. How can I do it?
Quick thinking, very smart.
And it's like, how? I'm going to keep myself alive, and they're going to get me where I want to go. And then I will deal with getting away from them later. I just love how smart he is.
I'm going to go with Littlefinger's banter with the sparrows. Here's someone who isn't a child, who doesn't have as much power as our, young king does, but he is able to just get his way out of trouble. And I loved seeing him banter and kind of spin them around and keep them from doing something bad to him. And so that was one of my favorite scenes. I'm mad at Littlefinger that for what we're going to talk about later, that he kind of abandoned, Kat's daughter. But with that part of it, I liked it a lot. I think that was a great scene.
So are you referring to when he's talking to Lancel?
Yeah, when he's talking to Lancel.
When he first comes in?
Yeah, and he's just this bantering of, a lot of people find pleasure. Oh, I'm just, just this it's a verbal fencing that every kind of, strike they're trying to take, he moves it aside and kind of keeps going, I'm on business for the Queen Mother. And it was just, I thought, really well done.
Yeah, because he could have very easily just gotten taken into custody for being a brothel keeper. And I have to assume in some regard, Cersei must have given him the heads up that Littlefinger was coming by. But the other thing I loved was his scene with Cersei. And I was completely surprised when he came out with, hey, Sansa's back in Winterfell. And, he couches it all with, I failed to find Arya, but I was able to find Sansa. And the whole way that he presented that information to hide his role in it was outstanding. And it's kind of the first time we've ever seen that. Like, we always get the reveal later that he was behind the plot, but that was actually seeing him doing the plotting right in front of us, which was awesome. And we finally know what his overall scheme is. He's going to let Stannis and Roose fight it out, and then he will go after the weakened victor. And I loved how Cersei is completely underestimating him. She's like, well, you're just a financial guy and a brothel keeper. You don't know anything about battle. And he's like, yeah, you're right. But, it's not going to cost you a thing if I just let my troops come. And all you have to do is let me be the warden of the North at the end.
Yeah, so two quick things on that. When he kept saying it, and then the lion, the Lannister, I'll be under the Lannister banner. I always have been, that kind of thing. The cinematography in that and the director's choice almost every time it cut to a shot of Peter, there was a background of a lion in the lattice work as he was saying that. It was just a nice, subtle little touch to reinforce what he was doing, and I thought it was well chosen. And then the second thing, are we to assume that it's already been established that Peter doesn't know that Ramsay is the monster that we all know he is? So if that is indeed his plan, is to let those two fight it out and then take the Knights of the Vale to mop up against the winning but probably decimated forces, then is he assuming that either Sansa will kill Ramsay or that Stannis will kill Ramsay and that he would have Sansa for himself? Because that's kind of what I was seeing in the gears turning in his head, and that he hasn't quite given up on Sansa yet.
I have just given up on trying to figure out what Littlefinger is up to until he actually does it. Because at this point, I think every time he enters a room, he decides, I'm going to say whatever they want me to say and add a little extra for myself, whatever I think they're willing to buy.
I think that Sansa is not the end game. I think being Warden of the North and maybe eventually, the Iron Throne is his end game. But Sansa's the cream on top. So if he can make that all work, that's great. But I don't know that that is his primary objective. We're supposed to think that he doesn't know that Ramsay is as evil as he is. I'm really curious what's going to happen, whether Sansa tells him or if someone else tells him, or what he does when he learns that Ramsay brutalized her, though.
Well, best case scenario, she takes care of business herself.
That's what I'm hoping.
Before he gets back. So by the time he gets back, she'll have dispatched the Boltons in some fashion and taken, vengeance for that and for her family and for many other reasons against the Boltons, against them, and then would be in a different position with Peter than she would if, I think it would be undermining her agency and diluting the story if he has to somehow come back and be her rescuer or.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about it that way. What I'm thinking about it is in terms of their power relationship and his guilt over leaving her there. To that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And if you think about, okay, so maybe he does want to marry her eventually, she'll always have that sort of to beat him over the head with.
You left me with this monster.
You left me with this monster. You didn't protect me. So to me, it's almost like it's in some way he's going to have to be working doubly hard in that relationship whenever he comes back. Ramsay, I think he just thinks people die all the time in war. Somehow he'll just die in the war. I don't know that he's thinking who's going to kill him necessarily.
We're going to have to just assume he doesn't understand what's going on there. And I agree with you guys. I have no idea what he has going on, because there's wheels upon wheels upon wheels. This is, the Inception version of Game of Thrones, right? He is gonna. I have no idea the amount of double crossing he's gonna do. If Papa Stark was too honorable and too out there, Littlefinger is the absolutely opposite, where he will tell you whatever you want to hear, make you believe it, and then continue on his merry way.
Yeah, he's a wild card.
Yeah, he's the Joker of Westeros.
But he's not actually funny.
No,
he's not. Though I love when he's on a rant, though.
I don't know. He was kind of funny when he was talking to Lancel. He turned his comment back on him, and I was like, huh.
He's more of a dry martini of humor.
Yes.
I love dry humor version of the Joker.
Yeah, he very rarely loses control. Yeah. Somebody like Cersei or Robert or some of the other people get a chance to chew all the scenery, and that's just not Baelish's way.
Yeah.
So the highlight for me in this episode is also not the disappointment, but just the saddest part, which is Sansa's wedding. First of all, I thought Sophie Turner did an outstanding job because a lot of what she had to do was just on her face or the way she held herself through that whole march to the forest for the wedding. I thought her wedding dress was beautiful. She had that. She reminded me of both Catelyn and Cersei because she had sort of a hairdo that reminded me of Cersei's hair, like in season 1, back when they were always wrapping their head in braids. And she played it so well because she was trying to hide her emotions from everyone seeing them, but they kept coming through anyway. And at one point when, they're waiting for her to say yes, she did a great job because it's like, maybe she's not going to do it. Maybe she is going to just like run off into the woods or something. But you could see her sort of like steel herself for this. And I loved the scene in the bath with this horrible Miranda person coming and, we see the real Sansa coming. Her hair is coming back to its real color. And she's talking about, this is mine. I'm a Stark. She was, really owning her place in that episode and schooling this girl. She's like, look, you don't know about threatening. I've been in King's Landing. You don't know about threatening. So then it was even more horrible because we knew who she was marrying. So I thought they did a fantastic job with just all the dread that I was feeling as her wedding was approaching. It really was beautiful, though. I loved all the lanterns out to the snow. I was like, wow, this is so beautiful and horrible at the same time. So for me, that was definitely the highlight. And then the whole scene with this marital rape and having Theon there and all that was so horrific that it was like it made me question a lot about what Sansa can really do if she can come back from this. I think she can. I hope she can. But the show has just really put her, she overcame so much and now she's got a really, really big next hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, without a doubt. I do agree with you on the staging of the wedding stuff. I thought it was one of the things Game of Thrones usually does very well is authenticate setting, and you could really feel that this was a northern type of wedding as opposed to the other weddings that we've seen in other parts of Westeros. So I thought that was really well done as well. And across the board, the acting was really strong as well, from not just Sansa, but from Theon and Ramsay as well. I just thought from that perspective, from the technical, artistic perspectives, I thought that whole sequence was well done. Morally, that's another story that I guess we'll probably talk about in the later on in the disappointment sections, maybe. But I agree with you. That section was really, really well done by everyone involved.
Yeah, and just to comment on the technical aspect for a minute, they're really in kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with the direction on that, especially the last part. Because if you accept that Ramsay is going to do that to Sansa, then if you show a lot, then it's too titillating or too sensationalistic or too focused on Sansa's suffering. However, you pull back and you kind of know what's going on, and then you focus on Theon watching the horror. But then that leaves you open to the interpretation of, oh, well, you're taking this away from Sansa and you're only showing this horrific thing happen to a woman, but only showing how it affects a man. And you leave yourself open to questions of, sexism or whatever. Whether I don't think I understand what they were going for, and I thought they handled it as tastefully as they could have, but they don't get cut a lot of slack because of two similar incidents. One, the Dany and Drogo, which changed from the books to make that less consensual on their wedding night. And then obviously the huge blow up where the director and everybody shot and edited and said completely the wrong thing with the Jaime and Cersei scene in the Sept, which according to all the text, book, script, whatever, was completely consensual, but when it was on film, read completely different, and nobody knew how to defend it, and it was a huge mess. So they were really in an awkward place on how exactly to execute that, and given all the awful things that were up in the air, I thought they did it as tastefully as they could have if they're going to include it.
Well, Shannon, you opened my eyes to what's probably been going on in the internet about that scene. I personally, I didn't need to see it. The sounds were enough. I mean, there was still acting going on. We didn't need to see what she was going through. We know what she's going through. What we wouldn't have known if we hadn't been shown it is how Theon was reacting to it. And I was very happy to see what was going on in his face, how much it hurt him to see what was happening and to be unable to do anything about it. He's just too broken to make a move on that. And I think the only thing I would have liked to see in addition to that was to be able to see if Sansa saw how he was reacting to it. I mean, she obviously saw that he's going through his own sort of torture just being in that room as it was, but I don't think she could see how much it hurt him to see what was going on there. And
right.
I thought that was more important to see that.
And in her mind, she still doesn't know that he didn't kill her brothers.
Yeah, in fact, I'm waiting for, crazy theory. I'm going to steal Brent's crazy theory time and have my own crazy theory. I think probably either episode 9 or 10 of this season, that's going to be the breaking point for him. Something happening to Sansa, and he's going to come clean to her about not killing her brothers. I mean, not to say that what he did wasn't bad. I mean, he did kill other people, but I think they're going to make a move together, and that'll be the way she's able to do something about her situation, is because nobody will see it coming from him.
Yeah, I agree, though. This is a good discussion. I agree that the wedding was beautiful. I mean, it shouldn't be, but I love that winter is coming. I mean, we're starting to see snow, right. In the north. We're starting to see her wedding dress, looked like a winter bride, and in front of the tree that was so important. And it is, and then I wanted her to try to say something to Ramsay, but she can't. She has no power, and he's just batshit crazy. And because I wanted her to say no, he shouldn't be here, but you can't. And when he said, "Do I have to repeat myself? I don't like repeating myself." That's so scary.
And Miranda had kind of warned her, even though Miranda is jealous of her.
Yes.
She let her know that it could be even worse.
Yeah, it really was. And you're just like, you hate it for her, and you feel for it. And like I said, I really thought, and just I think being optimistic, right, that Theon would kind of break through his spell. But that makes no sense that he could do that. I just would have loved that scene to see that. Just really powerful. And, once again, they just, no one gets a happy ending, pardon the pun, in this place.
You brought up Miranda and all the things she told to Sansa in that bath scene. I want to know if she's trying to manipulate and tear down Sansa, or if she's trying to get back at Ramsay, because I think she feels that their love should be stronger than his duty. And when he's so willing to toss her aside to marry Sansa and sleep with her just for his duty, that's something that might upset her, and maybe she's just trying to get back at him and just using Sansa as a tool.
And I read it as Miranda trying to say, okay, if she tells Sansa this, Sansa could run away, or try to escape, and that's good for Miranda. Or if she gets her hackles up and decides to say, I'm not putting up with this shit, and attacks or tries to kill Ramsay, that's also good for Miranda. So virtually anything she does to provoke Sansa is good for Miranda. And I read her as trying to be an instigator in that sense, because she really has limited control over the situation.
So she's in the Littlefinger school of manipulation. I'll just say whatever you want to hear and make sure it works out for me.
Yeah, because most of the resolutions, if she provokes Sansa to take action in any way, either fight or flight, benefit Miranda as the one still there and by your side and all that. That's how I took it.
I thought she was just being spiteful.
Yeah,
Or it could be as simple as that.
Yeah, I just read it as Ramsay told her to go make sure she has a bath, and she decided to play the spoiler.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least Sansa had one moment of happiness when Ramsay found out that his dad's wife is pregnant. So.
Yeah, I loved the look on her face last week with that.
So there was that.
I want to actually go back to the comment about Theon, though, because I do, and it's actually tied to the title of this episode, and I want to talk about that in a second, because he is so broken, but over this whole season, we've seen repeatedly that he keeps being reminded of who he was. And in this episode, he even says who he is. He's Theon, the ward of Ned Stark.
Yeah.
And so to me, he's slowly awakening back to who he was. And I think, this, and there's probably got to be one more horrific thing that will sort of snap him to become an ally with Sansa.
Yeah, that's a good read. I totally agree with you. So Ramsay is sort of unwittingly re-enabling him. But you have to think after that last episode, really the only thing that could snap him out of it now would be if Ramsay ordered him to kill Sansa, and in the act of doing that, he deflects it at the last minute and kills Ramsay instead. Because I don't know what more horrific things he can see and remain so dead inside. The end.
I was just waiting if anyone had any more to add about Theon.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I actually want to come back to the title because it's referencing the saying from Dorne. It's their
Martell's house motto.
Yeah, their motto. But to me, we had many, many characters who were being tested in this episode. You had Arya getting tested by the man. You had Jorah and Tyrion being tested about how far each one of them was going to go when they were captured. And then we have Marjorie and Loras, and whether or not they're going to be completely destroyed by this Inquisition. And then we have Sansa. And so my question for you guys is, who is Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken?
That is a good question. I still think Sansa is, but we, of course, have to see that in subsequent episodes. So
the three sisters certainly aren't, right?
Yeah.
They're coming out swinging.
Yeah.
Well, but they didn't achieve their goal. Their goal was to kidnap or kill the princess, and they didn't. Jaime and Bronn fought them off, and then they were all eventually captured by Prince Doran's guard. So, I mean, they didn't necessarily achieve their objective. Did other than Littlefinger, is anybody kind of staying ahead of, and maybe Cersei at this point?
Well, I mean, I think Tyrion is not.
Oh, I don't know.
He doesn't seem broken to me.
No.
He's pulling out of it. He's finding a way to get out of it.
Yep.
The Boltons certainly are not broken.
Yeah.
I think Tyrion was broken at the end of last season, and now he's coming back.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's swing back to Dorne, because I think that was our maybe less thrilled parts of the episode.
Definitely for me.
I think that's true of everyone. Is that accurate?
I think so,
Sounded like it was.
Yeah.
So Lou, start us off.
All right. Oh, Dorne. What's on the name? If it was any other name, we'd call it Ishtar, or maybe, even though Bronn is a great singer, a Bob Hope and Bing Crosby roadshow kind of movie. But That whole
I like it. On the road to Dorne.
Yeah, on the road to Dorne. Because like I know I complained on the episode before the last week's that what was these guys' plan, and at least I saw this week as well. At least they kind of look like Dornish guys now, but they didn't act like Dornish guys, and they just walked into this city. Like I can't believe that there's nobody checking. Like I know they don't check for IDs, but they must be checking people at the gate. So this is I think overall in season 5 it has exceeded the book in a lot of ways, book 4 and 5 for me, because the pace is so much better. But I think the whole Dorne section, because it's really the first season that it is the first season that we're seeing it. It's lacking the build-up or context and background that the other areas have been made up. So when they just come rushing into this place like this, and it doesn't have any context, so I don't have any emotional investment in what's happening here. So you're just looking at it really from a technical point of view. And I agree that, in general, like the set and everything looks good, and most of the costumes, but the costumes that the 3 sand snakes are wearing, I think are just ridiculous. Those pointed toes on those boots just keep diverting my attention. I can't see anything else. And I just didn't think that they have, the actresses or stunt people just didn't have the chops to carry off those fight scenes. It wasn't believable. And that Dorne just has not had enough build-up so that these events are palatable to the same degree that it would be if it was somewhere else.
I'm going to defend those boots just a little bit, only because I believe last week we had a link to the close-ups of the costumes.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they look pointy is that the soles extend a little past the toes, and it's supposed to represent the tongue of a snake.
Oh, that looks
obviously
stupid.
It makes it really hard to walk, but there's a reason their shoes look that stupid.
They look like elves from Santa's shop. That's why.
My issue with everything that's been happening in Dorne is the locations. I mean, basically, we've gotten desert and the water gardens, and it's always been this one little area of the water gardens. It seems like there's nothing in Dorne at all. All we've seen is not even indoors. And whatever room Ilaria was in, it looked almost like a cave, really. I mean, it just seems so claustrophobic. I know that they had special access to this palace in Spain, I believe, to shoot these scenes, but did they not do anything else for Dorne? Are there no other locations, even in the studio, indoor shots? Because it's Dorne is always sitting on that chair overlooking the water gardens, and Myrcella and Tristan, is that what his name is?
Yeah.
They've been wandering around in those water gardens for weeks. Do they sleep? Do they have bedrooms? What is there anything else? It's just so small. And I realize that in a desert setting, you don't get a lot of location. I mean, it's a lot of desert, and then the small compact city where things are stacked on top of each other because there isn't really a lot of room to expand. But it really feels like there's one building in desert, and this is supposed to be some big power.
Yeah, and with Marine and Karth and some of the other locations, they've done a good job with aerial view or big pullback shots of either an existing real structure or like in the bridge. They shot
Atlantis,
partially a real one and then added on to it, or they could have done it completely digitally like they do with a lot of Marine, or the wall at Yunkai or some of the other things. Yeah, so I agree. That's part of the problem. And
yeah, at this point, Old Valyria seems bigger than Dorne.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just given us nothing to hold on to. And then you cast a great actor like Alexander Siddig, and thus far he's only had a couple of lines. And, supposedly they recast Myrcella because she was a stronger actress than the girl that had been there previously, but they haven't really given her anything to do. So maybe it's going to pay off in the remaining episodes, but thus far, virtually everything except for the costuming and, that one set, which is gorgeous, has kind of been underwhelming about Dorne. And that's disappointing, especially given that our first entryway into that world was just the wildly talented and wildly charismatic Red Viper.
And my future husband.
Okay. I don't have too much to add except hearing Lou made me think of one of my favorite shows of all time, Sports Night, and I had to Google this real quick.
Woo, Sports Night!
Napoleon's battle plan, and
You
Casey
show up,
says,
then you see
"Yeah,
what happens.
first we show up, then we see what happens." Right? That was Napoleon's battle plan.
Thank you so much for that, Jesse.
Yeah, so that's what I was like. So I think that was Jamie, right? Jamie's like, first we show up, then we see what happens. So
I can see where you got that gold hand from.
Indeed.
And why did the snakes try to do their thing in the middle of the day? Like, that didn't make any sense either.
Well, to go back to the point about this location, it feels empty, which is okay. Sometimes palaces are huge and full of nobody because it's only these few elites who live there. So that's okay. But the fact is, Dad is sitting on the balcony looking at the garden all day long, which is where all these plots are supposed to be happening.
Right,
so it's really crazy that the two lovers are secretly meeting underneath Dad, that the three sisters come running out of the wings into the middle of the garden for their plot in broad daylight. And just happen to run into Bronn and Jamie sneaking into the gardens in broad daylight. So that's where it's like, seriously, somebody didn't really think about this at all.
I'm even unclear. Like, is the name of the palace the Water Gardens? Because when Bronn and Jamie were trying to get there, he saw that caravan and said, "Oh, there it is, the path to the Water Gardens." I'm like, okay, so it's not like a section of the palace, because that seems like a really weird name for a palace. Is the whole thing Water Gardens? Is there a throne room? Is this like a normal palace in any respect?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming we're in the exterior part, but because it's a desert, that's the best part, right? Is the part where they're wasting all this water on exotic plants that they can't afford.
And then in King's Landing and the Wall and many of the other locations, you always get a sense that it's bustling. Like when Marjorie and Lady Olenna are taking a walk, you'll always see people in pretty dresses in the background. And you get the feeling that just on the fringes of the camera and the scene, there's lots of bustling activity. And you never get that with Dorne. You think, well, there's only 8 people here and they're all plotting against each other in this one courtyard in broad daylight at the same time.
Well, I think that was probably a constraint of shooting in that special place. Maybe. They couldn't bring a bunch of extras in and they couldn't build anything. They had to build one very minimal thing around Alexander Siddig for what he was doing. But nobody visits him. And it seemed very clear to me that nobody ever visits this guy. In definite contrast to the people who come and petition Dany every day in Meereen. The fight itself, though, I didn't buy.
Nope.
I was always looking to see, wow, they're way out of range. They don't even look like they're possibly going to hit anybody. So that was frustrating. And I'm not like a bloodthirsty girl where I have to see amazing technique or anything, but I have to buy it. And especially when sometimes the camera would pull back and it's like, these women are tiny. Besides, it's like, this isn't even plausible. I mean, and the one thing that I will give the actor who plays Bronn huge props, though, is his charisma is kind of the only thing that holds that scene together at all.
Yeah.
Is when he's cracking jokes.
Let's hope he didn't get poisoned, because, my God, if we have to deal with Dorne without Bronn anymore, I don't know, they may lose us.
Yeah, and True Love, I don't really care about that True Love either. I sound terrible. I don't care about Grey Worm, Missandei. I don't care about these two tweens and their love either.
It's just teenage love. It's really ridiculous and, young. Let's be honest.
Well, it's the fantasy love that Sansa wanted.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's Sansa again, right? Maybe this prince won't be a jackass, sadistic monster
Oh no, I
Well,
think
he's
the
going to
difference.
die.
I think the difference between him and Joffrey, he's not violent, but I bet he's already slept with quite a few girls.
Yeah.
He'll be Robert.
I want to find out more about the faceless people.
Yeah, no, I won't. I was going to talk more about the Sansa and Ramsay scene, but I think we covered that a lot. And just because I spent a lot of time today reading reactions to that, and it seems like the uproar this time either it reached a breaking point for a lot of people, or they were frustrated with the fact that it happened to Sansa because
You know what? That bugs me. I think there's a lot of book readers who are upset that storyline has been given to Sansa, and therefore that happened to Sansa. I'm like, really? It's okay if it happens to someone we don't care about? What is this double standard? And let's be honest, it could have been much worse from what I was reading, right, Shannon, Lou?
Yeah, exactly. And when they swapped out, and I understand why they swapped out and got rid of the character that winds up marrying Ramsay anyway, Jane, who was like a kitchen girl, whatever, and childhood friend of the Stark children, but she comes to Winterfell as posing as Arya Stark. So Ramsay thinks he's marrying Arya in the books, and then the stuff that happens to poor Jane is, just depraved. It's different, but ever since they swapped that out and said, okay, Sansa's taken this role and going to be the one to marry him, myself and a lot of the book readers, I'm sure we were saying, oh my God, how far are they going to go with it? And, she said, I'll marry him. And I assume that when she enters into, yes, I'm going to marry him, and yes, we're going to have a wedding night, that she assumes they're going to have sex and consummate the marriage. Sansa's, she knows that, but she doesn't think, how's it going to be? And then she certainly doesn't think that Reek/Theon is going to be there to watch, and it's going to go down So she was kind of in control of her own destiny, and then all of a sudden she wasn't, and it was horrible for her. And it's just a really complicated, thorny issue to wrap your head and your emotions.
Really dumb it down. I'd say it's like going to the dentist expecting to get a cleaning and finding out you're there for a root canal. It's something that you don't want to do. It's very uncomfortable, unpleasant, probably just horrible, but it's got to be done, and you just want it over with,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't agree with that at all.
Like I said, you just
described Dany's wedding night, which was with a husband who wasn't a sadist. So, to me, the Dothraki marriage that we saw with Dany, it was done for titillation, the way they filmed it. But that was much more, I would say, typical of the way that it seems like this world works in terms of marital obligations to sex. And so it wasn't that he wanted to inflict pain on her. He just he was insensitive to what he was actually doing to her. Versus Ramsay was very explicitly terrorizing her, humiliating her, and brutalizing her. That is not just knowing that you're going to have sex on your wedding night. Mm-hmm. That isn't what she signed up for.
Right. And as I mentioned earlier, an unfortunate change from the source material in the Dany Drogo thing was that, Drogo was a brute and could barely speak her language, but they found a way to get through that there was consent before they consummated their wedding night. Whereas on the show, it again, inexplicably portrayed it more as a rape rather than Dany saying, yes, go ahead. I am your bride. I will do this, even though she didn't really know what to expect from this, hulking horse lord. She expected to have sex and gave him the go ahead. Whereas it was not that way on the show. And then, it's they don't earn a lot of benefit of the doubt when they mess up a couple of key scenes like that in a row.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's also, I think people are tired of, and it's not just the show. I think it's other shows too. We mentioned Outlander earlier about seeing women brutalized as part of storylines over and over again. And because I'm not a book reader, So I don't know if the book readers might be ascribing some malice by the showrunners towards the Sansa character by giving her this storyline. I don't
No, that's
conclude
not
that. I conclude that they just did it for efficiency, because if this horrible thing does happen to Sansa, who is someone we care about, it makes it even more relevant to the story versus side characters that we don't really know.
Yeah, there's an element of that, but I think it's more, from what I've seen on the internet, it's just that act period. I don't think like obviously there's more emotional investment with Sansa, but people just don't want to see that action at all. And like people are saying that the show's taking the lazy way out, using that as a plot device again. And if you're not comfortable with that stuff, and it's not an excuse, but this is the world of this story is taking place in, and the people want a sanitized version of the story. Is what they want today's sensibilities applied to a story that's taking place in another culture, another time, another place.
Yes.
These are the people who.
But marital rape happens all the time. It happens all the time today.
These are the people who want Legend of the Seeker instead of the Sword of Truth
and
novels.
if you don't like that, then I'm afraid you're watching the wrong show, because it's been well established. And the points about, and we're all in agreement that these are terrible events and that, but you can't ask for the show to sanitize it or change it to fit what you want the story to be. It has to be what it is. And if you don't like it, then you just can't. You just have to make the decision not to watch it. I mean, that's really
it's
as
amazing
simple as it is.
The difference in media between books and TV shows and movies. I mean, all of this stuff was in the books. I mean, it was worse in the books. All of it was worse in the books.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody was having a problem with that, because there's so many people out there who don't read. It's a different type of person who reads, and they just accept that when you're talking about a fantasy setting that's meant to relate to an old time period in our real world, these things happened. This is the way the world worked, and the readers will just accept that. But for some reason, when you put it on a TV show, all of a sudden it's an outrage. And I'm sorry, but you should, if you don't think there should be rape shown or even talked about in a medieval setting, you shouldn't be watching anything in a medieval setting. That's the way it was. It's horrid, and it's a fact. And to remove it from the story is a lie, and it's not believable.
Jumping in for a minute, Shannon.
Okay.
Just this is a brutal show, and bad things happen to almost everyone. I mean, we have had mutilations, we've had murders, we've had rapes, we've had just
burned alive, human
burned,
sacrifice,
so
defenestration.
But this, no more, right? And I just think this is a brutal show. And
Shannon, thank you for using that word, by the way.
Exactly, and it is I think the idea is, and all kidding aside, they do the show well. This is a good story, and I'm captivated. And even though I keep going, is anyone going to win? Are we going to have, victories? Part of watching the show is the little things, Bronn got to sing a song, okay, that in this world, that's a thumbs up, So, and I agree.
I think the tone of the show, go back to the first episode and you will understand the tone of the show. I mean, we've got incest happening in that episode. We've got
a kid thrown out a window with a beheading.
Thrown out of the window, a beheading at the beginning of the episode even.
Right.
This is the tone of the show. And if you thought it would be different 5 seasons later, well, then you're lying to yourself. And you should not be playing the game of faces. I will hit you.
They killed Ned Stark, right?
Yeah.
You keep thinking they killed the star of the show because that's what the story led. And so we have seen Ramsay being brutal. I mean, was there an uproar about Joffrey just getting to play with his crossbow and shoot Roz?
There was. There was.
I think a lot.
I think a lot of it is, to Christine's point, it's visualized, so it's in your face. You can't pretend you didn't remember that you read it in the book, right?
Yeah.
But it also, these are characters we care about. We care about Sansa. I think we care now more because we've come a much longer journey with her than we had when Dany got married, for instance. And that happened. We were outraged for Cersei. I don't know if we would have been so outraged if that scene had happened in the pilot with her and Jaime. And as part of the dramatic arc, now we are even more invested in Sansa getting her paybacks and Ramsay getting his karmic accounting happening. I mean, that's part of what the drama of the story is. And I certainly would not tell people you have to have these elements in order to have an outstanding drama. I don't believe that. But this is the universe that this story is set in. And it would be wrong if all of a sudden it's puppies and unicorns and rainbows in Westeros.
Yeah, and the horrific violence and bad luck and sadism and gruesome battle injuries and backstabbing, it's happened to men, it's happened to women, it's happened to children, it's happened to people from all over the country of different creeds and religions and races and ages. The brutality of Westeros does not discriminate. So I don't think there's an ism, whether it's racism or sexism or ageism or anything. It's not picking on one particular person. It's just a brutal, unflinching world. And there are psychopaths in it, like a Joffrey, like a Ramsay. But the point I can sympathize with some of the uproar is, people are saying, well, what purpose does it serve? And the trope of a woman being raped so she can then, it gives her motivation to get her revenge. If you're critical of that, you could say, well, she already wants to be critical. They ransacked and took over her home and they, killed her family, and she already has plenty of motivation. So you don't need to pile this on top of it. And if you use it as motivation for Reek, then you're using a woman as a tool, getting raped to motivate another character. And that's probably not wise, I understand that.
You ask, what's the purpose of it? Well, that's the biggest problem with it. There never was a purpose for it. In any instance, for any case, there is no reason for it, but it exists. It does exist, and it was in the book, and it was going to happen. They should just be thankful that they decided to show us Theon's face.
Well, but the other piece of this is these horrible things do have a consequence. They're what is propelling these continued conflicts that are going on. The murder of the Starks is what is propelling the conflict now. Theon's choices are what's propelling the conflict now also. And now what has happened to Sansa is going to propel more of the conflict. And, the North remembers, a lot of things can still happen that are going to be directly tied back to this, possibly. So it isn't that it's meaningless. It has plenty of meaning.
Right. No, I'm just saying I understand where people are coming from when they say I get tired of this happening, and I'm expressing some empathy to those viewpoints, even though, I'm obviously a fan of the show and of the books because we're sitting here talking about it. But, if you look at the other side of it and say, well, what use is it? Not every action has to have a specific use, and it has to be a happy action. Look at every one of our characters almost has suffered in some way, some horrible loss that's not just sexual violence, but physical violence and emotional violence and loss of lands and loss of family and everything. It's just a brutal world, and you can't pick and choose, well, okay, it happened to this one person, so that's it.
Yeah, and I think it's just illustrating the difference between, like as somebody mentioned earlier, about when you read the books, or the book readers weren't really complaining about this stuff, but TVs and movies play to such a much broader audience, and you're naturally going to get a much broader spectrum of tastes. And some of those people are expressing their displeasure with where the show is at right now. I mean, it's kind of like what happened with Man of Steel. I mean, it's one thing. Or some of the comic book movies in general, like people are, in comic book movies or books, it's one thing to see like a city get leveled, but to visually see that in a movie like, say, Man of Steel or something like that, a lot of people don't want to see that in their stories. They just want something that they can enjoy. And this series carries a heavy payload, but I think the rewards are worth it, because this, people for years complained about the pap that was on TV, on network television. And then once cable started to come along, then we started to get like the Wires and the Breaking Bads and whatnot, and The Walking Dead. And, you have to judge for yourself whether or not, if the story's pushing boundaries, whether or not you want to keep following it or not.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a drama. I definitely have heard the complaints about, the Dark Knight version of Batman is too dark.
Yeah.
We're tired of the woe. And this episode was depressing because nobody really got a win in this episode.
Got the Jesse.
That's exactly. That's what I said.
So I understand why that turns people off, because I think it's perfectly valid to expect entertainment to entertain you. And I think this is an episode that was challenging. It wasn't there to entertain you. It was to move the story and the characters that we care about forward, but it definitely wasn't trying to entertain you or make you happily shirk off, your work day or your current real life for a fantasy life.
Yeah, and it's an
Arya got to win. If you're upset with the end of the episode,
Arya got to level 2, but she got smacked pretty hard to get there.
She earned it.
She did get to level 2. That's a good point.
But you have to take a life to get there.
At the end of the episode upset you, go back and watch that part of the episode.
So, and it's also at an interesting time too, when there's, like I think Lou's point about Man of Steel is a good one, because in a way, I saw Avengers Age of Ultron, and it's not big spoilers, but one of the things is that they actively show the Avengers trying to rescue people, and there's a lot of scenery devoted to showing that, which was almost if it wasn't a direct response to Man of Steel, it was certainly a different approach to take in showing that, and so it's an interesting
did that
time.
In the first Avengers movie,
right? Yeah, no, they did.
They leveled New York pretty good in the first one.
Just 3 blocks.
It's an interesting time with an intersection of, like with all this pushback, we're like, oh, how many anti-heroes can we have on TV after Tony Soprano and Walter White and now Don Draper, even though they're all various degrees of terrible. And do we see that in an intersection of feminist issues? And, is it, and people getting fed up with violence against women? And, so it makes for interesting discussion, and I can see why it's a hot topic for a lot of people.
They should all go see Mad Max. Women rule in that movie.
I'm gonna go see that.
Maybe that's why I'm enjoying the show so much. I didn't watch The Sopranos, I didn't watch Mad Men, I didn't watch Breaking Bad. I didn't get any of that, and I think maybe because nobody wants to see these horrible things happening to women, but I think it's because it's a uncomfortable topic that people don't want to talk about, and they're forcing you to talk about it. It's in your face, and it's a hot button topic right now, and there are a lot of people who just want to shove their head in the sand and make it go away, and this show isn't letting them do that, and it's making them uncomfortable. And unfortunately, it's a fact that exists and probably should be talked about.
And like Shannon said, I think the backlash from the Cersei Jaime scene really informed how they filmed the scene that we saw last night.
And they did themselves absolutely zero favors with that scene. Not just the way it was shot, the way it was edited, and everything everybody said in the press. I don't think the backlash against the Sansa scene would be nearly as big if they didn't bungle that previous scene so completely.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've...
But except for that, we have nothing else to add.
We could talk about this
other than that
all day
was a
long.
small
We're
addendum.
Yeah.
Before we go, I do want to remind people about our Small Council contest. And again, Ballard Harris, all men must serve. So we expect you to speak up and serve some information back to us. And we'll give you a great treat if you do. I also want to thank everyone for listening and thank our Small Council of Lou, Christine, Shannon, and Jesse. We will see you again next week.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
See you next week.
We love to get your feedback. Call us at 206-202-4182 or leave us a Skype voicemail to our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV name. We have many ways to keep the discussion going on our blog. Drop by tuningintoscifitv.com and leave a comment. On the blog, you'll also find links to the forum discussions and other links to follow our Twitter and RSS feeds and find our Facebook account.
Listen to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV on Stitcher Radio on Demand. Download the free app today at Stitcher.com. You've been listening to a Game of Thrones special from Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, Episode 41, recorded May 18th, 2015.